100 million. That is a huge, almost indescribable number. So let me put it into a little context for you. About 100 million years ago, the first bees appeared on Earth. There are about 100 million people in Egypt and a little under 100 million people in Vietnam. There's approximately 100 million seconds in 3 years. So 100 million is a lot. Now let me throw one more example at you. 100 million sharks are killed each year. So with its constant and drastic decrease in shark populations, it's clear that the issue of declining shark populations isn't going to go away anytime soon. Now, I personally have done vast online research into this topic, into the threats shark populations face, how that affects them, how that affects the ecosystem, and how that in turn affects us. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on during this presentation. I'm going to inform you of the threats shark populations face, how that affects the populations, how that affects the ecosystem, and how that in turn affects us. So let's start with the threats. The 3 biggest threats to shark populations are overfishing, finning, and bycatch. Now, you may not know what finning is, so let me explain it briefly. Finning is when fishermen catch live sharks, cut off their fins, and then throw the sharks back into the ocean where they're left to either bleed out or drown. They do this because fins are what sell and the shark meat just isn't needed and just takes up room on their boats. Now, bycatch is when nets that have been thrown into the ocean to catch other marine animals accidentally catch sharks and they get tangled up in the nets and just can't survive. So now that you know the threats they face, let's dive into how that affects their populations. According to a journal article by Nathan Pacaro, the shark and ray populations have decreased by 70% in the last 50 years. Some specific shark populations are the sand tiger sharks, who are estimated to have lost over 80% of their populations in the last 74 years due to fishing and finning pressures, and they're currently listed as critically endangered. Now, the bonnethead sharks, a smaller member of the hammerhead shark family, have seen a, quote, population reduction of 50 to 79% over 3 generation lengths, 36 years, due to actual and potential levels of fishing and habitat loss and degradation due to coastal development and hence is assessed as endangered, unquote, as stated in the Red List article for bonnetheads. Now, whale sharks, the biggest fish on Earth, has had a population decline of an estimated 50% over the last 75 years. Now that you're aware of just how drastic these population decreases are, let me explain how that affects the ecosystem and in turn us. Because many people view sharks as simply large, threatening, scary animals to be afraid of when you want to go swimming in the ocean. They don't quite understand how decreasing shark populations could mess up the ocean ecosystems and how that could affect us. So let me use a real-world example. Off the coast of North Carolina, where great whites tend to gather during times of the year, there was a drastic decrease in the great white population, which in turn caused the ray population, what they feed on, to increase. And that caused the ray population to overfeed on scallops, their main food source, which caused the scallops to drastically decrease in population levels. This affected people because the market for scallops suffered from there not being enough scallops to catch and sustain the needed levels. Now, let's review the information I've given you so far throughout this presentation. The shark populations are dying off at a terrifying rate. Bycatch, overfishing, finning are killing 100 million sharks each year. Sand tiger sharks, bonnetheads, whale sharks, all their populations are decreasing rapidly. And that affects the ecosystem. Sharks keep prey population levels at a healthy balance, and when the shark populations decrease, the prey populations increase, in turn causing their prey populations to decrease, messing up the entire ecosystem and food chain, which in turn messes up the market for these sea creatures. As seen in the Mystic Aquarium's article on sharks, an estimated 200 sharks are killed every minute. That means that while you've been standing here listening to my presentation, an estimated 1,200 sharks have been killed.